Hey everybody, and welcome back to Split Couch Games. I'm Scott, and I have a bit of a different video for you today. It's still Gears of War related, as you can tell by the title, but it's not a theory video, and it's not a tutorial, so hopefully you guys find this interesting as I kind of basically just try and find something good about Gears of War Judgment. In order to do this, I'm going to have to spoil that game in particular, a bit of the Slab novel, but really anything that is Gears of War related is fair territory for spoilers after the intro. The best way to describe Gears of War Judgment, in my opinion, is incomplete. There weren't enough maps in multiplayer. Overrun seemed really good as a base, but lacked any long-term depth in my opinion. The campaign didn't have the cinematic feel because they shoehorned in the arcadey aspect of scoring points during it and tallied those points after every chapter. So it really just broke up your immersion. And I give it a hard time if you've heard me talk in the podcast and everything. And I don't enjoy the game that much, but it wasn't a terrible game. It just wasn't a good Gears of War game. And I think that's the biggest thing. But I was rereading the Slab recently in order to do my theory on whether or not Niall Sampson was alive in Gears of War 4, or at least responsible for the Swarm. And something jumped out at me in relation to Gears of War Judgment from the Slab novel. But in order to get to that, I want to talk about Gears of War Judgment first. If you haven't played Gears of War Judgment, or you just need a refresher because it's been a while, it's basically Damon Baird's old squad, Kilo Squad, was put on trial because they went against direct orders during the Locust invasion of Halvo Bay. They took it upon themselves to steal a government technology, the light mass missile, and used it to destroy the Locust boss Karn, Locust General. He's a boss fight, that's what I meant there. The entire story is told in flashbacks as the Kilo Squad members recount their tale of what happened, and eventually Lieutenant Baird and the rest of Kilo Squad are pretty much exonerated because the Colonel Loomis, who is presiding over the trial, realizes that they needed to do what they did in order to save as many lives as possible, and he sort of had a change of heart. However, it is, and this is actually so important to the overall story of Gears of War, and especially with Baird's character, because he's told that he's never going to be a lieutenant again, and he's demoted to private. And that's why we get Private Baird in the original trilogy. And this is actually a really tragic story for Baird, because he didn't want to be a soldier. At his heart, he wanted to be an engineer, not a gear. But because of his upbringing, his family was very similar to Marcus Phoenix's family in that they were a very old, prominent family, and going into the army as an officer was just something that you did. You did your duty, you retired from there, and then you went off and basically just hung out with other high-powered families. But that's not what Baird ever wanted. Baird wanted to he always wanted to create and build things and work with his hands. And you see that throughout the series, actually, where in the first game he fixes the APC. Later in Gears 3, he fixes Jack. There's so many instances of him being that guy and not the soldier that he's supposed to be. But the thing about Baird is that when it comes down to it, he's going to do everything he can to save as many people as he can, especially his friends. And that, therein is the tragedy, because he did what he thought was right, and he ended up getting punished for it. He saved so many lives in Halvo Bay, but because of bureaucracy and all that, he ended up being punished, and he was never going to be in a position to do that again. So of course he's going to hold a grudge against the COG and all their bullshit and everything like that. But that story is not over, unfortunately. Because at the start of Gears of War 1, we see the soul of games just absolutely thrown into the wound. Gears 1 starts with Dom rescuing Marcus Phoenix from prison. And we never really find out why Marcus Phoenix was in prison until the Slab novel was released, I think in 2013 or 2014. I think that we also see a bit of it at the start of Gears of War 3. I don't remember if the Slab came first or if Gears of War 3 came out first. Basically what happened was that every single gear, Marcus included, were fighting for control of Ephyra. And this is such a major turning point in the war. The Locusts are pushing in basically the last remaining stronghold that the humans have. Because of the granite bedrock, the Locusts are not able to tunnel up in Ephyra. There's a particular bridge called the Chancery Bridge, and Marcus was told by Hoffman to take the Hammer of Dawn there and basically blow the bridge up so the Locusts can pass over it. Marcus Phoenix is prepared to do his duty and go and blow the bridge, but then his father calls for him on the radio. His father basically says that the Locusts are attacking his home and says goodbye, and I believe he says I love you, but it's not super important. It's basically a goodbye message. This triggers something in Marcus, and he abandons his post. He runs to the aid of his father. Marcus ends up leaving and going to try and help his father. He ends up failing, and he gets punished for dereliction of duty. The punishment for which is death by firing squad, and as far as anyone really knows, no one has ever had that commuted down to a lesser sentence. But a few circumstances that I'm not going to get into in this video, Marcus gets his sentence reduced to 40 years in prison. But as we know, a few years later, Dom comes and rescues Marcus from the prison because Hoffman has pardoned everyone, and it's because the war is going so poorly that they need literally every hand, including all of the terrible inmates at the only prison that's open. So as you play through Gears of War 1, Marcus leaves, goes through and joins Delta Squad, which Lieutenant Kim is leading. Lieutenant Kim ends up dying to Ram, and immediately Marcus Phoenix is promoted to Sergeant and is the leader of Delta Squad. And who else is in Delta Squad? Baird. So from Baird's perspective, this war criminal who did far worse things than Baird ever did, whereas Baird broke rules in order to save hundreds of thousands of lives, Marcus Phoenix broke rules to go save his father. But in the end, Marcus Phoenix is getting rewarded because of some sort of personal relationship with Hoffman or some sort of war hero status. And that's really tragic for Baird. In reality, Baird should have been in charge. And the fact that Marcus Phoenix went to prison for what he did was a huge story around basically the entire country, because he was a war hero in the Pendulum Wars, was fighting during the Locust War, and was really just a big morale boost for everyone. So Baird knew what was happening. But for someone who's already very sarcastic and hesitates to open up to individuals and be close to other people, that's really got to impact Baird. And I think that that's something that's very important about Gears of War Judgment. And that's something that I think that a prequel should do. And it should change the way you look at the original pieces of work. So while Gears of War Judgment wasn't a great game, I think it really did serve a purpose. And I know a lot of people, when it first was announced, why are you telling the story of Baird? No one likes Baird. Well, a lot of people did like Baird because he was sarcastic and a realist, while others just thought that he was a dick. And that's totally fine. But I think that this story needed to be told. I just wish it had been done better. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. If you guys enjoyed, please let me know in the comments. I would love to discuss more Gears. I think next video is going to be a tutorial. I recently kind of figured out how I wanted to proceed with those. So if you guys subscribe for those, please, be patient. They'll be out. There'll be one out next week, actually. So look forward to that. And I will see you guys next time on Split Couch Games.